The fire alarm screamed at 3:47 a.m., but I already knew. I'd been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling of my one-bedroom apartment, feeling something wrong in my bones. By the time I reached the street, orange light was bleeding through the windows of the Nook, my cafe, my dream, my everything. The glass storefront had shattered outward, and through the smoke I could see the shapes of my family standing across the street, watching. My mother's hand pressed against her mouth, my brother's jaw tight with something that wasn't shock, my sister's eyes, red-rimmed, refusing to meet mine. The fire trucks hadn't arrived yet. The flames hadn't touched the counter where I'd served my first customer, or the wall where I'd hung the faded photograph of my grandmother. But standing there in my pajamas, I understood something I'd been too blind to see for years. The fire wasn't the beginning of my destruction. It was the end of something else entirely. And somewhere in the chaos, a single thing survived. A small, hand-carved wooden bird that had sat on the windowsill since the day I opened. It was still there, watching, waiting. My name is Eli Vance, and until 3 years ago, I was a project manager for a corporate real estate firm. I wore gray suits to gray meetings in gray buildings. I had a 401k that my father was proud of, a corner office with a view of the parking garage, and the kind of hollow satisfaction that feels like success until the silence creeps in at night. I'm 33 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the person everyone depends on, the steady one, the reliable one, the one who shows up early and stays late and never complains. I was the kid who balanced the family checkbook when I was 12, the teenager who drove my sister to school when my mother was too exhausted, the adult who paid the property taxes on my parents' house when the construction business started failing. My greatest wound is the kind you don't talk about in polite company. It's the slow realization that the people who raised you see you not as a person, but as a resource, a tool, a safety net. I spent my 20s trying to earn their love the way you earn a promotion, through performance, through sacrifice, through the quiet, desperate hope that someday they'd see me. Really see me. Not as the son who can fix things, but as someone worthy of love simply because he exists. My biggest fear has always been the same, that I've spent my life becoming what everyone else needed, and in the process lost whatever it was that made me me. That somewhere along the way I traded my soul for approval I'd never truly receive. My quiet dream, the one I'd whispered to myself in the dark corners of late nights, was a small cafe. Not a chain, not a franchise. A single beautiful space where the coffee was perfect and the pastries were fresh, and the people who walked through the door felt like they'd come home. A place that smelled of cinnamon and shared secrets. A place my grandmother would have loved. I'd saved money for 7 years. I'd taken on extra projects, skipped vacations, driven a car with 200,000 miles and a broken air conditioner. I'd told no one except my best friend Maya, who worked as a graphic designer and promised to design my logo for free. "You've been taking care of everyone else your whole life," she'd said. "It's time to take care of yourself." But taking care of yourself, I've learned, is the most dangerous thing you can do to people who've built their lives around your selflessness. The day I quit my job, my father called me 3 times. My mother left a voicemail that was mostly silence, punctuated by weeping. My brother Theo sent a text that said simply, "You're making a mistake." My sister Claire called to ask if I needed a loan. She meant well, she always meant well, but I heard the hesitation in her voice, the inherited suspicion that I was doing something foolish. The Nook opened on a rainy Tuesday in October. I'd painted the walls myself, a warm shade of butter yellow that reminded me of summer mornings at my grandmother's house. I'd sanded the floors until my hands blistered. I'd installed the espresso machine with the help of a YouTube tutorial that took 6 tries to get right. And on that first morning, exactly 3 people came in. One was Maya, who'd taken the day off work. One was an elderly man named Arthur who'd wandered in seeking shelter from the rain. And one was a woman in a business suit who asked for a black coffee and then spent 45 minutes on her phone, ignoring me completely. I made $14 that day. I felt like a king. The first 6 months were brutal. I woke at 4 in the morning, baked pastries until my arms ached, opened at 6, closed at 6, and cleaned until 9. I'd fall into bed, dream of espresso shots and flour, and do it all over again. I lost 15 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. My hands were perpetually chapped from washing dishes. My social life evaporated. But slowly, impossibly, something began to grow. The regulars started coming. Arthur became a fixture at the corner table, reading his newspaper and nursing a single cup of coffee for hours. A writing group began meeting on Tuesday evenings. 6 aspiring novelists who ordered 1 drink each and stayed until closing. A single mother named Elena brought her daughter, Rosa, after school, and Rosa would do her homework while Elena scrolled through emails, and I'd sneak Rosa a free cookie when her mother wasn't looking. The Nook became a place, not just a business, a place. And that, I was about to discover, was precisely what my family couldn't tolerate. My grandmother, Nora Vance, had been the heart of our family. She'd raised 4 children in a small house with a big garden, and every Sunday the entire family would gather at her table. She made pierogi from scratch, rolling the dough with hands that were always dusted in flour, her wedding ring catching the light as she worked. She never had money. My grandfather had been a factory worker who died young, but she had warmth. Real warmth. The kind that made you feel seen. She was the only person who ever looked at me and said, "Eli, you have your mother's stubbornness, but you have my heart. Don't let anyone tell you that's a weakness." She died when I was 22. My mother sold the house within a year. The garden was paved over. The pierogi recipe, which my grandmother had promised to teach me, vanished with her. When I asked my mother for the recipe, she looked at me strangely and said, "What would you do with it anyway?" I think that was the moment I started saving for the cafe. I just didn't know it yet. My family now consists of my mother, Patricia, who is 68 and has the kind of steel spine that comes from raising 3 children alone after my father left. My father left when I was 15, not because he was a villain, but because he was a broken man who'd spent his whole life doing what was expected of him and finally snapped. He moved to Florida with a woman named Diane. I've seen him 3 times since. My mother never speaks of him except to say we're better off without him. My brother Theo is 38. He's the golden child, a real estate developer who married rich and lives in a house that's more square footage than I can comprehend. He inherited my mother's pragmatism and none of her emotional complexity. He thinks in terms of assets and liabilities. People, to Theo, are either useful or they're not. I'd always known he viewed me with a mixture of affection and condescension, the little brother who couldn't quite figure out how the world worked. My sister Claire is 31. She's the peacemaker, the one who tries to smooth over every conflict with a gentle word or a sweet pastry. She married a man named Derek who sells insurance and has the personality of a filing cabinet. She's a nurse, and she's good at it. She has a natural kindness that seems to exist outside of our family's dysfunction. But Claire is also afraid. Afraid of conflict, afraid of anger, afraid of being the one who breaks the fragile peace. So she smiles and nods and pretends everything is fine, even when it isn't. The first time my mother visited the Nook, she stood in the doorway for a full minute, taking it in, the butter-yellow walls, the mismatched chairs I'd bought from estate sales, the wooden bird my grandmother had carved sitting on the windowsill, the small display case with fresh pastries, the smell of espresso and cinnamon. "This is very you," she said. It wasn't a compliment. "Thanks, Mom." She sat down at a table near the back. I brought her a latte. She'd always preferred lattes to coffee and a croissant. She picked at the pastry, breaking off tiny pieces and not eating them. "Your brother says you could have invested this money in something safer," she said. "Good for Theo." "He's just worried about you, Eli. We all are. Small businesses fail. You know that, right? It's not like you're just playing around. This is your life savings." "I know what it is." She looked at me then, and for a moment I thought I saw something in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or concern, or love, buried so deep under layers of disappointment that it barely registered. "Your grandmother would have loved this place," she said finally, and then she left, leaving the croissant untouched. That was the last time she visited for 8 months. Part 4. Introduced the second main character. Nora Chen walked into the Nook on a Tuesday afternoon in July. The air conditioning was broken, and I was sweating over the espresso machine, trying to salvage a batch of pastries that had refused to rise. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up, expecting Arthur, who always came at 2 o'clock for his afternoon coffee. Instead, I saw a woman I'd never seen before. She was in her late 20s, maybe, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun and glasses perched on her nose. She was wearing a yellow sundress that looked like it had been purchased from a thrift store. And she was carrying a cardboard box that was clearly too heavy for her. "Hi," she said, slightly breathless. "I know this is crazy, but I just moved in next door, and I think my landlord gave me the wrong keys, and I really need to use a phone because my battery died, and—" "Whoa, okay, slow down." I put down the pastry tray. "Let me help you with that box." She let me take it, and I was surprised by how heavy it was. "What's in here?" "Books," she said. "I'm a librarian. Or I was a librarian. I'm between things right now, but I can't get rid of my books. That would be like getting rid of my soul." I carried the box to the counter while she explained the situation. Her landlord had given her a key that opened a different apartment in a different building, and the moving truck had already left, and she was stranded in a city she didn't know with no phone and no friends, and a mountain of boxes. "Can I get you some water?" I asked. "Or coffee? You look like you need coffee." "I need a lot of things," she said, and then she laughed, a warm, genuine laugh that made something shift in my chest. "But coffee sounds incredible." I made her a latte. She sat at the counter while I worked, telling me about her journey from Chicago, about the library where she'd worked for 5 years until budget cuts eliminated her position, about the small inheritance from her grandmother that had allowed her to make this leap and start over. "I don't know why I chose this city," she said. I had a feeling. You know? like something was waiting for me here. I didn't know her well enough to share that I'd had the exact same feeling when I'd found this space. The way it had called to me from across the street. The way I'd known immediately that this was where I needed to be. "Do you have a name?" she asked. Eli Vance." "I'm Nora. Nora Chen," and then the bell above the door chimed, and the moment was gone, replaced by the lunch rush. But somehow, I knew. The same way I'd known about the cafe. Something had shifted. Something had started. Nora came back the next day, and the next, and the next. She'd found her apartment, a tiny studio above a laundromat, and she was spending her days job hunting and her afternoons at the Nook. She'd claim a table near the back, spread her laptop and her papers across the surface, and work for hours while I served customers. Sometimes we'd talk for a few minutes. Sometimes we'd simply share a smile across the room. Arthur adopted her immediately. He'd stop by her table on his way to his corner, asking about her job search, offering unsolicited advice, telling her stories about his late wife. Nora listened to him with the kind of patience that seemed to come naturally to her. Not the forced patience of someone being polite, but genuine interest. "You're good with people," I told her one evening, after Arthur had gone home. "I just like him," she said. "He reminds me of my grandfather. He was a storyteller, too." I was sweeping the floor, the last customer having left, and Nora was helping me stack chairs. It wasn't something we'd discussed. She'd just started doing it one day, and I'd let her. "What's your grandfather's story?" I asked. "He was a carpenter," she said. "He came to America with nothing, built houses for 30 years. He used to say that building something with your hands is the only way to know you truly exist." I looked at the cafe around us, the yellow walls, the mismatched chairs, the counter I'd refinished myself. "I think I understand that." She smiled. "I think you do too." The wooden bird on the windowsill caught her eye. "That's beautiful," she said. "Where did you get it?" "My grandmother made it," I said, "before she died. It was the last thing she ever carved." Nora walked over to the windowsill, studying the bird carefully. It was small, no bigger than her palm, carved from a single piece of pine. My grandmother had painted it with care, adding tiny details to the wings, the beak, the eyes. It wasn't a masterpiece of craftsmanship. It was something better, a thing made with love. "She was an artist," Nora said softly. "She was everything," I said. Nora turned to look at me, and something passed between us, an understanding, a recognition. She reached out and touched my arm, just briefly, just enough for me to feel the warmth of her fingers through my shirt. "My grandmother left me a ring," she said. "It's the only thing I have from her. I wear it every day." She held up her hand, and I saw the ring, a simple band of gold with a tiny pearl. "She must have been very special," I said. "Special doesn't even begin to cover it. My family's attempt to destroy me didn't begin with fire. It began with a series of small, careful cuts, the kind you barely feel until you realize you're bleeding. It started with Theo. He showed up at the Nook on a Friday afternoon, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my rent, and ordered an espresso. I served it to him with a smile that felt like I was wearing a mask. "This place is nice," he said, looking around with an expression that suggested he was appraising a piece of real estate. "But the location isn't great. You're not in the commercial district. Foot traffic is minimal." "It's fine," I said. "Ely, I'm just trying to help." He sipped his espresso, then grimaced. "The coffee's a little bitter." "That's the right bitterness for an espresso. See, this is what I'm talking about. You're too close to this. You can't see the problems because you love it too much." I wanted to tell him that the problem wasn't the coffee. The problem was his entire worldview, which reduced everything, people, places, dreams, to profit and loss. But I'd learned long ago that arguing with Theo was like arguing with the wall. The wall was better at listening. "Thanks for stopping by," I said. He stayed for 20 more minutes, making observations about everything from the light fixtures to the layout of the tables. Every comment was a needle, carefully placed. Nothing too dramatic. Nothing I could point to and say, "That was cruel." Just a constant, low-level pressure that made me feel small. When he finally left, he said, "You know I love you, right? I just don't want to see you fail." It took me 20 minutes to shake the feeling that had settled over me. The familiar weight of being seen not as a person but as a project. Someone to be fixed. Someone to be managed. Nora came in a few hours later, and I must have looked terrible because she immediately put down her laptop and said, "What happened?" My brother, I said. He sounds like he's a lot. He's a lot, I agreed. But he's also right. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should have done something safer. Nora walked around the counter and stood in front of me. Listen, she said. I don't know your brother, I don't know your family, but I know you, and I know what you've built here. This isn't a mistake. This is the thing you were meant to do. You don't even know me. I know enough. She pulled off her glasses and cleaned them on her shirt, a nervous habit I'd come to recognize. I know that you give Rosa a free cookie every day, even though you can barely afford to pay yourself. I know that you let the writing group stay until 11, even though they only order one drink each. I know that you remember every customer's name and their order and their life story. That's not nothing, Eli. That's everything. I didn't know what to say. I'd spent so long being told I was wrong that I'd stopped believing I could be right. My brother has a wife and a big house and a lot of money, I said. Maybe he's the one who knows what he's doing. Maybe he has a big house, Nora said. But has he ever given Rosa a cookie? I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed in weeks. A few weeks later, my mother started calling. Not to check on me. Never to check on me, but to talk about the family. The calls always followed the same pattern, an opening about something unrelated, then a slow pivot to the business. Your Aunt Betty says you've been open for almost a year now, she said one Tuesday. Yes, Mom. And are you making a profit? Eventually. What does that mean? It means I'm doing okay. Okay isn't sustainable, Eli. You need to be realistic. The thing about death by 1,000 cuts is that each cut individually is survivable. It's the accumulation that kills you. My mother's phone calls, Theo's visits, my father's silence, they all carried the same message. You can't do this. You'll fail. We told you so. My sister Claire tried to help in her own way. She'd send me encouraging texts, tell me she was proud of me. But she never visited. She'd always have a reason. Derek was sick, the kids had soccer, work was crazy. I knew she was avoiding the family drama, and I didn't blame her, but it still hurt. The customers were the only ones who kept me going. Elena and Rosa came in every day after school, and Rosa would do her homework at the counter while Elena worked on her laptop. The writing group expanded to 10 members, and on Tuesday nights the cafe would fill with the gentle hum of creative energy. Arthur came every day, and he'd started bringing his grandchildren on Saturdays, 2 little boys who'd order hot chocolates with extra whipped cream and tell me about their video games. The Nook was becoming what I'd dreamed it would be. A community. A home. So why did I still feel like I was failing? It was Claire who finally told me the truth. We'd met for coffee, not at my cafe, but at a chain place on the other side of town, somewhere neutral. She'd looked tired, darker circles under her eyes than usual, her hands wrapped around her cup like she was trying to warm them. Ely, she said, there's something I need to tell you. What's wrong? The family, they're not just worried about you. They're actively trying to hurt your business. I stared at her. What? Mom has been telling everyone she knows that you're struggling. That the cafe is failing. She's been calling the bank, trying to get them to reassess your loan. Theo has been spreading rumors to other business owners in the area, telling them you're not trustworthy, that you're going to default. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Why would they do that? Claire reached across the table and took my hand. Because they're scared. Scared of what? Scared of you succeeding. Scared of you not needing them anymore. Scared that if you can build something beautiful on your own, it means they're not necessary. I pulled my hand away. That doesn't make any sense. Eli, listen to me. Her voice was desperate. They've spent your whole life telling you you couldn't do anything on your own, that you needed them. If you succeed, it proves everything they've ever said was a lie, and they can't handle that. But they're my family. Family is complicated, Claire said. Sometimes the people who love you are the ones who hurt you the most. The wooden bird sat on the windowsill of the cafe, watching. I'd stopped noticing it, but Claire's words brought it back into focus. My grandmother's last gift. The only thing she'd left me that mattered. What do I do? I asked. I don't know, Claire said. But you need to know the truth, so you can protect yourself. I'd spent my whole life avoiding conflict. I'd smoothed things over, kept the peace, sacrificed my own needs for the comfort of others. But Claire's revelation changed something. It activated a part of me I'd never used before, the part that refused to be destroyed. I started documenting everything. Phone calls, text messages, conversations with bank representatives. I hired a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Yang, who listened to my story with a grim expression and said, "Your family is committing economic sabotage. If you can prove it, you can stop them." "We're not going to sue them," I said. "No," she agreed, "but we'll make them think we might. Sometimes the threat of legal action is more powerful than the action itself. We sent a cease and desist letter. It was formal, dry, and absolutely terrifying. I didn't include my mother's name or Theo's, just a generic warning that any further interference with my business would be met with legal consequences. The phone call stopped. My mother didn't call for 2 weeks. Theo's visit ceased. The bank assured me that my loan was secure. For a moment I thought it was over, but my family wasn't done with me. They were just changing tactics. The fire was reported as suspicious. The police investigated, but no one was ever charged. The surveillance footage showed shadows, nothing more. The official report concluded it was of undetermined origin. The Nook was destroyed. My heart, my dream, my everything reduced to ash and smoke and the smell of burned coffee. I stood on the sidewalk for hours watching the firefighters work. Arthur came, he'd heard the news and driven across town, and stood beside me in silence. Nora arrived soon after, her face pale, her eyes wide. "I'm so sorry," she said. And then she reached out and took my hand. The wooden bird sat on the windowsill, untouched by the flames. It had survived again. Waiting, watching, my mother arrived at sunrise. She looked exhausted, her hair unkempt, her eyes red. She walked toward me, and I braced myself for the words, the "I told you so," the "you should have listened," the final blow that would break me completely. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she grabbed my arm and pulled me into a hug. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." It was the first time she'd called me baby since I was 6 years old. Weeks later, I was cleaning up what remained of the cafe when I found something in the rubble. A charred wooden box that had been hidden in the floorboards behind the counter. I'd never noticed it before. It had survived the fire, protected by a metal lining that had melted in the heat, but kept the contents safe. Inside the box, wrapped in plastic, was a stack of letters. My grandmother's letters written over the course of 40 years to me, to my mother, to everyone she'd ever loved. The first letter was addressed to me. It was dated 6 months before she died. "My dear Eli, I know you're going to build something beautiful someday. I can already see it in you. The way you take care of people, the way you notice things others don't. You have my heart. Please never let anyone tell you that makes you weak. I've left you my recipe for pierogi. It's in the box with this letter. Your mother doesn't know about it. I never told her. I'm sorry about that. But she was never the one who loved you the way you deserve to be loved. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you." The recipe was there, written in my grandmother's careful handwriting. I sat in the rubble and wept. Reversal 2. A month after the fire, my mother came to me with a confession. She'd known about the box. She'd hidden it there when I'd signed the lease, because my grandmother had given it to her with instructions to give it to me when the cafe was ready. "I didn't want to give it to you," she admitted. "I wanted you to fail. I wanted you to need me. I'm so ashamed, Eli. I'm so ashamed." "Why?" I asked. "Why would you want that?" She sat down heavily on the chair I'd rescued from the ruins. "Because I've spent my whole life being afraid. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of being alone. Afraid that if you succeeded, you'd leave me behind. Mom, I would never leave you. All the things I said to you, all the ways I tried to tear you down, I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I made you small enough, you'd stay safe. But I was wrong." She looked at me with eyes that held a lifetime of regret. "You were never supposed to be small. You were supposed to be big. You were always supposed to be big." Nora found the ring in the rubble, my grandmother's ring. It had been buried in the ashes, charred and damaged, but still intact. I hadn't even known it was there. "Your mother must have put it in the box," Nora said. "Maybe she didn't give it to you because it wasn't the right time. Or maybe she just didn't know how to let go of the last thing your grandmother ever gave her." I held the ring in my hand. It was warm from Nora's touch. The truth that redefined everything came from the most unexpected source. My brother Theo showed up at my temporary apartment, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He was carrying a box of his own, filled with financial records, property deeds, and a single photograph. "It was me," he said. "The fire. I did it." I stared at him. "What?" "I hired someone. I paid them to burn your cafe. I thought if I destroyed everything, you'd give up. You'd come back. You'd stop being so goddamn happy and successful and make me feel like less of a failure." Theo had always been the golden child, but underneath the shine was something broken. He'd spent his life chasing success he couldn't quite catch, building a persona that was hollow at the core. My grandmother had known it. She'd written about it in one of her letters, describing Theo as a boy who hides his soul behind a wall of achievements. "You're going to turn yourself in," I said. "I already did." He set the box down. I confessed this morning. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired. He sat down. His face crumpled. I'm so tired of pretending. I'm tired of hating you for something you never did. I'm tired of being scared that I'll never be enough. I'd waited my whole life for an apology from my brother, but this wasn't an apology. It was something far more complicated, an admission of failure, a surrender. I didn't know how to feel. When you come out, I said finally, you're going to help me rebuild the cafe. He looked up at me, confused. What? You're going to help me rebuild. You're going to work in the kitchen and make coffee and serve customers until you understand what I've been trying to build. And then we're going to start over. I burned down your business. Yeah, you did. And now you're going to fix it. The wooden bird had survived again. It was waiting in my apartment, sitting on my windowsill watching. My grandmother's symbol of hope, a reminder that even after the fire something could remain. I rebuilt the nook. It took 2 years, a lot of help, and more money than I ever thought I'd spend. But it happened. My family, my broken, complicated, wounded family, helped me. Theo worked in the kitchen for a year, learning to bake, learning to serve, learning to be part of something instead of outside of it. He still wasn't great at talking to people, but he was trying. And that, I'd learned, was enough. My mother visited every week. She'd bring flowers for the counter, sit in the corner, and watch me work. We still had our differences. We still struggled to understand each other, but we were talking. That was more than we'd had before. Claire quit her job and started working with me. She had a natural gift for hospitality, and she was good at making people feel welcome. The cafe had a new energy, warm, open, full of second chances. And Nora. We're not going to sue them, I said. No, she agreed. But we'll make them think we might. Sometimes the threat of legal action is more powerful than the action itself. We sent a cease and desist letter. It was formal, dry, and absolutely terrifying. I didn't include my mother's name or Theo's, just a generic warning that any further interference with my business would be met with legal consequences. The phone call stopped. My mother didn't call for 2 weeks. Theo's visit ceased. The bank assured me that my loan was secure. For a moment I thought it was over, but my family wasn't done with me. They were just changing tactics. The fire was reported as suspicious. The police investigated, but no one was ever charged. The surveillance footage showed shadows, nothing more. The official report concluded it was of undetermined origin. The nook was destroyed. My heart, my dream, my everything reduced to ash and smoke and the smell of burned coffee. I stood on the sidewalk for hours watching the firefighters work. Arthur came. He'd heard the news and driven across town and stood beside me in silence. Nora arrived soon after, her face pale, her eyes wide. I'm so sorry, she said. And then she reached out and took my hand. The wooden bird sat on the windowsill, untouched by the flames. It had survived again. Waiting, watching, my mother arrived at sunrise. She looked exhausted, her hair unkempt, her eyes red. She walked toward me, and I braced myself for the words, I told you so, the you should have listened, the final blow that would break me completely. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she grabbed my arm and pulled me into a hug. I'm so sorry, baby, she whispered. I'm so sorry. It was the first time she'd called me baby since I was 6 years old. We're not going to sue them, I said. No, she agreed. But we'll make them think we might. Sometimes the threat of legal action is more powerful than the action itself. We sent a cease and desist letter. It was formal, dry, and absolutely terrifying. I didn't include my mother's name or Theo's, just a generic warning that any further interference with my business would be met with legal consequences. The phone call stopped. My mother didn't call for 2 weeks. Theo's visit ceased. The bank assured me that my loan was secure. For a moment I thought it was over, but my family wasn't done with me. They were just changing tactics. The fire was reported as suspicious. The police investigated, but no one was ever charged. The surveillance footage showed shadows, nothing more. The official report concluded it was of undetermined origin. The nook was destroyed. My heart, my dream, my everything reduced to ash and smoke and the smell of burned coffee. I stood on the sidewalk for hours watching the firefighters work. Arthur came. He'd heard the news and driven across town and stood beside me in silence. Nora arrived soon after, her face pale, her eyes wide. I'm so sorry, she said. And then she reached out and took my hand. The wooden bird sat on the windowsill, untouched by the flames. It had survived again. Waiting, watching, my mother arrived at sunrise. She looked exhausted, her hair unkempt, her eyes red. She walked toward me, and I braced myself for the words, I told you so, the you should have listened, the final blow that would break me completely. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she grabbed my arm and pulled me into a hug. I'm so sorry, baby, she whispered. I'm so sorry. It was the first time she'd called me baby since I was 6 years old.